Our show tonight is pretty darn exciting. We've got two amazing guests lined up. And first up here, a musician, author, filmmaker, spiritual teacher, okay, lead singer of the musical duo Kingdom of Heaven since 2012. He was also the founder, frontman, sole, constant member of the magical musical collective Radio Werewolf from 84 till 93. Written some books, The MANSON FILE, Myth and Reality of an Outlaw Shaman. Demons of the Flesh, A Complete Guide to Left-Hand Path Sex Magic, which is Hugh's favorite. Co-authored with Zena Flowers from Hell, A Satanic Reader. It's a satanic screen and illustrated guide to the devil in cinema, which is awesome. And the first edition of the MANSON FILE. His forthcoming series of novels, The Dallas Book of the Dead, was previewed on NPR's Berlin Stories. Directed the documentary Charles Manson Superstar. In other words, our guest tonight has done it all. He also teaches Tantric Buddhist meditation, just quite like Zena, which is very exciting for me. Live from Berlin tonight, we have Nikolas Schreck with us. Yay!
Hey there, gentlemen. Pleasure to be here again.
How do you find time to even use the restroom, much less be on this show?
I never use the restroom, and I never sleep, and that does it.
I got you. All right, well, okay. Unlike Amanda, who's narcoleptic and drops off every 3.5 seconds during the show.
Shark.
Man, he has got it going on. Well, Nikolas, I know you've got a lot going on. Let's start by letting you tell our friends worldwide tonight about the book, about this amazing book.
Right. Well, actually, strangely enough, exactly a year ago, yesterday, I did the only other interview I've granted about the MANSON FILE, Myth and Reality of an Outlaw Shaman, to Tate LaBianca program, which is a specialty show that, focuses entirely on the case. And what I was thinking tonight, because we covered in that huge interview, it was a 3-hour interview last year, pretty much everything about the murders and the crimes, short of reading the book out loud. I mean, we really got into the details. I wanted to get into some more of the aspects of the book that haven't been covered. So that was something I discussed with Amanda. But the book has received excellent reception, which has been very gratifying. And it is starting to change people's perceptions about this case, which have been locked into nothing really more than a cartoon series of caricatures for over 40 years. So finally, new information and information that's been available for many years but was never set in the right context is getting out there and correcting the impression about what really is one of the most enduring American myths and legends, but which has almost nothing to do with reality as it's understood by the public.
Well, kind of help us understand that, because there are so many myths surrounding the entire thing. I mean, every time you read a new article or you watch a new movie or you check out maybe a special on TV, the stories evolve again and again and again. I mean, I've heard it all from they were an alien group of extraterrestrials that were put here to a satanic cult to everything in between. I mean, you name it, it's been a part of it. So kind of set the record straight for us. What is the truth?
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I think we have to begin, and I'll try to make this brief, although it took a nearly 1,000-page book to clarify all these things, because there are so many misunderstandings, exactly as absurd as you said. Aliens, CIA apparative, satanic cult, you name it. I think we have to start with the fact that, if you're Joe Public, what would you say these murders were about? What would right off the top of your head? And then I'll answer that. I think that's where we have to begin.
Well, I think they were always conceived as a cult, right? I mean, you had Charlie Manson and his whole family, basically, living on this farm, correct? And
right.
But my conception was that it was always there was drugs involved in this somehow, and that was really the root cause.
If we were on You Bet Your Life, you have said the magic word, drugs. That's exactly what it was all about. The motives for the Tate LaBianca murders and the other lesser-known murders, the Gary Hinman murder and other crimes that went on at that time that were not fully fatal, basically what this whole crime phenomenon was about was the Manson commune, which is maybe a more appropriate name than the Manson family, which they actually never called themselves at that time. They were just a loosely knit commune, like many young people in the 60s, and they were actually extraordinarily different from many of the other communal groups in California. They were deeply involved in drug dealing because when psychedelic drugs particularly became illegal in 1966, obviously it became very dangerous to deal drugs. So what it really comes down to, the essence is the Cielo Drive murder of Sharon Tate, who is always touted as the most famous victim of the crimes, and the La Bianca murders the next night. These were involved with rival drug dealers who killed each other in the process of a major drug deal that got wildly out of hand. They were not strangers to each other whatsoever. The Manson commune, particularly Tex Watson, who is the real orchestrator of the murders, not Charles Manson, was a drug dealer long before he met Manson. And Jay Sebring and Wojtek Frykowski, who were two of the lesser-known victims at the Polanski house that night, were well known to be drug dealers. All of these people were involved in the same social circle, the same film and music industry social circle of drugs, sex, and rock and roll that defined 1960s California. And as my book explains in exhaustive detail, revealing information that was never revealed in court, and which in fact was hidden in court by Vincent Bugliosi, who basically created the Helter Skelter myth. This was a series of drug deals that went wrong, and the murders occurred as an accidental result of what was planned as a robbery of a huge amount of drugs that were delivered to the Polanski house that night. So I think that's the first myth. It was not a dangerous cult of homicidal maniacs. It was a group of young people who got involved with drug dealing, exactly like in Prohibition in the 1930s when America had the insane idea to illegalize alcohol. That's what created the gangster culture of Chicago and a huge crime wave and many bloody murders. Basically, the Tate LaBianca murders, the so-called Manson murders, were nothing more than drug deals, that were melded with organized crime. And that's another part of it that has been hidden, the connections of the victims and the murderers to the mafia and to organized narcotics dealing in Los Angeles and the film industry and the music industry. So maybe that's the first myth we needed to clear up. And, this is the glamorous myth of the Manson family, which really never existed. So that's the first thing, is that this was nothing to do with Helter Skelter. That there were certain philosophical notions that the Manson commune had, but the murders had nothing to do with it. It was just a series of squalid drug deals that were covered up in court so that the lives of the celebrities involved and the mafia figures who were involved in the drug dealing industry would not be revealed. And so you mentioned at the beginning satanic cults, aliens, etc. These days, because of the internet cesspool of disinformation, people have access to all kinds of ridiculous rumors. But, I want to make it clear this isn't a conspiracy theory. It wasn't the Illuminati or secret societies. It was powerful people in the film industry and music industry basically covering their ass so nobody knew how deeply enmeshed in organized crime and drug dealing. And also, another thing that was hidden about it was the sexual connections between these people during the swinging 60s in Hollywood, which was like a nonstop orgy in which the Manson commune knew, extremely famous people whose careers would be destroyed if that came out. So hopefully that clarifies some of the main myths.
One of the things I thought was really cool was the Crime News website and how they said that your book was a magnum opus, groundbreaking in its precision and exhaustive in its research. I love that, and it went on to say it was the most comprehensive and most balanced book on Manson yet done, and I think that that's absolutely wonderful and very poignant, because we needed something like that. It is one of the great American myths. Also, almost has become the status of urban legend itself. I mean, there are several urban legends within the myth even that it has grown. So it's really neat that you've taken the time and the energy to do this. And I just kind of want to know why, Nikolas. What was it that kind of pushed you? Were you tired of hearing all the stories? Did you want to know more about it? Were you fascinated? What kind of moved you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I got to know Charles Manson in late 1985. I had really no interest in the murders. I contacted him because of my interest in his music, his spiritual ideas, particularly his interest in ecology, mysticism. A lot of people don't know about his Outlaw philosophy of radical ecology, and his ideas about music and his religious concepts. That was why I contacted him. And I've known him since then, and I got to know him as a human being and a person. And only in the process of getting to know him did he occasionally speak about the true nature of the crimes. And in 1993, as I explain in my book, in 94, Zena and I moved back to America from Austria, and through, not because I was looking for the answers, but somehow life sometimes opens a mysterious door. You could almost say like a house of forbidden secrets, if you know that phrase.
Yeah.
No. Hey, I'm wearing the shirt, man.
That's right. Very awesome.
And so this information came to us, and I know you're a horror film aficionado, so maybe you will know this rather obscure name. An actor named Ferdinand Maine,
yes,
who was in Roman Polanski's The Fearless Vampire Killers. He plays the main vampire in that film. He revealed to us the beginning of the nature of what really happened. He told us that it was basically an open secret in Hollywood, that the helter-skelter myth was not true, that this was a drug deal that went wrong between people he knew very well. He knew Sharon Tate, he knew Polanski, and he knew other more obscure figures it would take too much time to describe, but that is exhaustively detailed in my book. So he was the person that opened up the reality to us. So it's more, to answer your question more succinctly, I didn't go looking for it. It came to me, and through him, and also I've spoken to most of the major figures on every side, on the side of the victims in the Polanski circle, and I've spoken or corresponded with most of the people involved with the murders or who were on the periphery of the Manson commune and have known Manson very well for many years. So that unique perspective has allowed me to see both sides, and ultimately to see that these people were leading very similar lifestyles. And as very often happens, extremely gruesome and bloody crimes, as any criminologist or policeman knows, usually happen between people who know each other very well, not strangers.
I've even heard it twisted the other way, that Roman Polanski was actually the one that was more involved in the seedy underworld and maybe even the occult, and just right. Charles Manson's group was just trying to get their money for the drugs, is the way I understood it.
Wow.
Well, okay, the Roman Polanski is actually an atheist who has absolutely no interest in occultism. The reason for that rumor is because of his making Rosemary's Baby in 1968, which started the satanic occult revival in America and the witchcraft craze in the 60s. And because of the rumor mongering that the Tate murder was a satanic ritual, because right. When the murder occurred, people had no idea who did it. You have to remember that for many months it was an unsolved crime. So because it happened in the wake of Roman Polanski making this most famous satanic film, a lot of speculation was that Satanists had killed them because Polanski revealed occult secrets. Well, that's nonsense. He was just a filmmaker, and he's never... However, when you say Polanski was involved in the seedy underworld, yes. And my book details in great, exhaustive detail, again, what was covered up by not having a proper investigation of what was going on in his home. And that would be too detailed to get into here, but that part is correct. However, at no time was the Manson commune satanic, and I have known most of the major Satanists in America personally, and many of the occultists worldwide. So I can speak, most books about this subject are from people for whom this topic is something distant and exotic. It's not to me. Since I know that milieu intimately, I can tell you the Manson group was never part of any satanic movement. In fact, in the 60s, before the crimes, they were looked at as almost boringly too Christian and goody-goody and, like Jesus freaks. So, however, I do get into the book Manson's Concepts of God, which gets into the Gnostic deity Abraxas. And, you mentioned that review that said that my book is one of the greatest true crime books of all time. But actually, another review pointed out it's not really only a true crime book. It also gets into such questions as who is God and the nature of spirituality. And it goes much deeper into some of the things you started talking about in the beginning. What is the actual nature of Manson's teaching? Why were people even attracted to it in the first place? It was not this simplistic helter-skelter nonsense, which is all you see in the newspapers. Right.
And that's one of the things, to me, the whole thing kind of goes back to we still have the problem today. And that is, anytime something goes down and it involves people with a little pull in politics or with some pull of some power in places like Hollywood or whatever, they always have to find a boogeyman to pin it on.
Right.
And I think, unfortunately, in this case, Charles Manson was that boogeyman.
Right, and in no way am I whitewashing Manson, which I'm sometimes accused of. If you go against a legend and a myth and try to make it more human and make it more ambiguous, as all human beings are, then the do-gooders and the people who want to be seen as socially conventionally on the side of right think you're defending that. But I'm not. He, of course, is a criminal, but he's not a murderer. And that's a big difference. And he's not this monstrous figure. One thing I was going to mention to you, because you mentioned something a little earlier that reminded me of it, about all the urban legends. I know your theme song for the show partly is from the Haunted Mansion theme in Disneyland,
You got it. Yep.
Yeah, so actually it's a part of Disney aficionado lore that the Haunted Mansion opened on August 8th, 1969, which was the night that the Tate murders occurred. And it was a sneak preview for the Disney employees to see it the first time. So that whole weekend when the Haunted Mansion opened, Los Angeles was in fear because of the news of the Tate LaBianca murders. So that's always sort of been connected. And the weird thing about that, among many strange coincidences between these things to do with the Manson phenomenon, is, in the Haunted Mansion, you're guided by doom buggies. And doom buggies were a very important part of the Manson commune's legend as well. So there's some sort of hidden connection there. But so that theme was first played on the night of the murders to the public.
Clearly a conspiracy. Clearly.
Yeah, I tell you what, I find it a fascinating subject only because of where it's gone. I think if it was just treated like you have treated it, logically, and if proper research was done, I think the subject would have been a footnote in our history, and it would have been something that we read about in these books, but it wouldn't be what it has become,
One thing that I've thought about a lot in recent days because of the huge coverage of the anniversary of the Kennedy murder, it's very similar in that, as you said, when a powerful person dies, or even a person with pull at all, there's a great deal of cover-up through the media of what really happened. And in a way, the Kennedy assassination began the 60s as we know it, a period of doubt and of youth trying to find an alternative culture because of the despair and the sense of loss and confusion in the wake of the Kennedy shooting. And the Manson murders sort of ended that period. So there's a lot of connections between them. And in the same way that they have both been covered up, and there's a party line that is put across by the mainstream media, and even like you can compare it to the Kennedy assassination in that all of the reports on the major networks and the major media sources are saying, well, there's still no proof that there was a conspiracy. We're pretty sure Oswald acted alone. But if you really look deeply into it, there's, thousands of bits of evidence that point to a pretty clear narrative of who must have been involved with it. But it's too complicated for the public to really grasp. They want very simple stories, and that's why Lee Harvey Oswald did it, or Manson is solely responsible. This kind of simple answer is easier for the public to grasp.
Nikolas, what do you think of the public kind of, I know you have the Charles Manson Superstar title, but what do you actually think of the public, people like Marilyn Manson, who are taking bits of his persona and maybe even like doing the X on the forehead and things that are, people who are kind of almost making him a cult idol?
Yeah, I feel partially responsible for that because of Charles Manson Superstar, which Marilyn Manson has stolen from shamelessly, as well as a lot of the imagery of Radio Werewolf. But in things like Rob Zombie and other figures like that who have taken things that we were doing in the earlier 80s and then sort of dumbed it down, I actually regret that I feel like that's a Frankenstein's monster that my early work on Manson created. The first edition of the Manson File, I think it simplified it. It turned it into something stupid. It made it as shallow as just wearing a T-shirt, something cool and hip. And that was never my intention. But I do feel partially responsible for that. And that's one of the reasons why I felt that it was necessary to write this. I specifically feel like it shouldn't be glamorized. It shouldn't be turned into this youth culture trend, which has become rather dated now, I think.
You mentioned Radio Werewolf, and I wanted to take a minute here to kind of commend you on that, because it was kind of a cool thing. For me, when I first saw it and first heard of it, I liked the fact that it had this imagery, this kind of darker imagery, and it was kind of horror related, though it wasn't really horror movie-ish in a way. It was kind of a connection, and at the time, we had some fluffy stuff, like we had Kiss and we had Alice Cooper and stuff, but you guys, you took it to a whole new level. Like you said, it was intelligent. It was downright creepy, is what it was.
Small plug.
Yeah.
Actually, the strange thing about that is that we were recording Radio Werewolf at the same time as Alice Cooper was in the studio, and he actually said to us, "Man, you are the real thing. I'm not." So he must have picked that out of the ether.
I did. Yeah, see there, I'm on the wavelength. Well, Alice was out playing golf afterwards. You guys are the real thing. You guys were actually practicing what you preach.
Exactly. Although that was a different person than the person I've become. I mean, I'm always flattered and pleased that almost 30 years after Radio Werewolf began, that people are still interested in it, and it still garners a new fan base. But I've moved on in many ways.
Of course, yeah, and that's the thing is, and we talked to Zena about the same thing, and how wonderful it is, to see the transformation actually. Like she even was talking about, the caterpillar to butterfly transformation there. How it, she started out somewhere similar. And
right.
She also had that transformation, and I'm really excited about that, and about you both doing the Tantric Buddhist meditation and things.
Well, it has to be understood. It's just part of a lifelong spiritual search. I began in the search in the darkness and moved towards the light. So, but it is all part of the same, search for what is reality, what is the truth. I began it with the devil. And I found that was ultimately not the ultimate truth of, what's going to lead to liberation is not the devil. So
right.
That's what ultimately led us to Tantric Buddhism. But I'm also not moralistic about it or judging it. It's just a question of perceiving what is reality.
Can you tell our friends a little bit about that? I mean, what was that like for you, the spiritual awakening that happened and how it kind of evolved?
Well, actually, it wasn't quite as dramatic as some people think it was, because really, even when I was a ardent and fanatical devil worshiper, which is what I was, even in the 60s, 70s, I was always looking into Eastern mysticism, and I began practicing meditation as a teenager. So it was always more of a going back and forth between Western ceremonial magic, goetic demonology, and traditional devil worship, not atheistic modern Satanism. But I always was meditating and doing yoga, and so it was like a slow process of ultimately deciding through practical results and experience of meditation that the Eastern mysticism, first in the Hindu left-hand path, and then in 2003 we converted to the Tantric left-hand path of Buddhism. So it was a gradual process. It was not I think the public has an idea that it was sort of like an instant conversion. It was something much more subtle than that.
Kind of took its time, kind of just as you evolved as a human being.
Yes. It
It
was a question of, through meditation, you start to see what the nature of reality is. And so I started to see that occultism and devil worship, although they provide all kinds of thrills and chills and flash and fireworks, they do not provide liberation and ultimate perception of the way the mind works and what reality is. And without preaching to anyone, I have found that Tantric Buddhism does provide that. And, I have no doubt about that.
And it seems to me also that it has affected your art as well, because like the Radio Werewolf stuff was pretty phenomenal, but now you're doing new music, and it seems different, pretty far removed.
Oh, I was a different person. Radio Werewolf ended in 1993, and the new music that I hope we will be able to preview tonight on Nightwatch from Kingdom of Heaven, my new musical project with James Collard, is completely different. But, it would have to be. Any artist who keeps repeating themselves is not really doing art. So this is music that reflects where we are now.
That's what I love about it, and I think that's true, like you said, of all great artists. I mean, music through the ages, if you go and you listen to a band that may be your favorite band, and you can kind of pick out, even though like certain bands have their own signature sound, like the Beatles and this and that, but you can pick out like time periods so that they were, and not just because of the production being, sometimes you listen to a record, you go, all right, 1984, just because the production's so crazy. But this is more like you can tell their growth as an artist, and even though they may have their signature sound still, they don't plagiarize themselves.
Right. Well, I never wanted to do that. I mean, I always have I've used the format of popular music and the whole palette of popular music themes, but I've never wanted to restrict myself, and I never considered myself to be part of any of these subcultures that I have been thrown into. I just consider it music, so this is where my music is now, and the way that it came about really was quite organic. As James Collard and I formed a bond many years ago, and when we recontacted each other when I was working on my autobiography, we immediately began talking about music, and it was just as if songs began writing themselves through us.
Wow.
And they had their own, we became servants of these songs, and it was almost mandatory that we had to do them. And we didn't really have any contrived plan whatsoever. And we just sort of moved our egos aside, and the music came through us, and eventually it needed a name, and Kingdom of Heaven came to us as the proper appellation. And really it's something that has a life of its own that we find mysterious, and that really we try not to explain, because it's a very interesting process of how a song has its own life and is manifested through two people's collaboration.
I love it. It's just very refreshing because let's admit it, in this day and age, it's like recycled everything, and half the music you hear on the radio is written on a Macintosh. It's not even written. It's just they push 3 buttons and there it is.
Right. Well, my collaborator in Kingdom of Heaven and I, James Collard, we are extremely old-fashioned. I mean, we are very much focused on restoring the art of the album, of not just music to be listened to as you're walking around and on earbuds as distraction and wallpaper, but music to really be focused on, listened to, and each song has to be listened to in context of the album. So we are very much traditionalists in that regard. And, it's these days paying attention is a lost art in itself, and we're making music that has a lot of nuances, subtlety, and is not just merely meant to grab you for an instant and distract you, but something to take you somewhere, something to change your consciousness.
That's what I loved about albums. I mean, it wasn't just buying the album for the music, it was buying the album cover and being able to look at it and take it in along with the music. And
well, you took the words out of my mouth. That's something that we're doing with Kingdom of Heaven is I don't think people see that the popular music or rock music format is actually a unique work of art in itself, exactly like you said, where the logo, the album, the design of the album, the order of the songs, the persona of the group, all of it creates an entirely new form of art in the 20th century that really hasn't been fully explored, even though it's about 50 years old now. And in a way, Kingdom of Heaven is returning to a period in popular music, let's say in 1966 to maybe 1976, when people like Brian Wilson with Pet Sounds were actually making popular music that was on the highest standards of art. And we're sort of going back to the ruins of that and going in a new direction from there. And that's a direction that has been pretty much forgotten in the desolate wasteland of popular music today.
Exactly. Well, Nikolas, why don't we play a clip here, the first clip you gave us for In Dreamland. Why don't we play that for our friends out there?
Okay, well, first I should tell you something I'm not really supposed to tell you, but, for all of your lives, you have been groomed by strict scientific guidelines as experimental guinea pigs merely to listen to this song. You never knew that, did you?
I did not know that.
But you've been so kind and supportive, I just thought I had to tell you that. This is a snippet, not the full song, of In Dreamland from the forthcoming Kingdom of Heaven album.
Excellent. Here we go. Man, I am digging the chord progressions right there.
Yeah, see, that's music that will take you somewhere.
That's precisely what we want to do. It is music meant to transport you, so very glad to hear that reaction.
Well, yeah, and I just like the combination of sounds. I mean, like you say, music is music. There's so many chords in the spectrum and so many notes in the spectrum, but it's what you do with them to create something. And I like the palette. I like the sound of the palette. It's very rich, and I like how it's interacting. Great job.
And the organ. And
yeah, it's amazing stuff. I really enjoyed it.
Well, both James and I are very much believers that the soundtrack is one of the most underrated forms of 20th century art. And so we very much consider that we're making miniature soundtracks for films that don't exist.
I love that. I
always like John Williams, you look at movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark. That movie would not have been the movie it was without the music in that movie.
Yeah.
I'm going with Carpenter, but Alan Howarth.
Well, we go even further back to people like Bernard Herrmann.
Oh yeah,
and into the classics, because as I said, we're very much traditionalists. We're almost as if we've been in a time capsule in another world, and this is taking that music into another direction that music never went into. It's almost like an alternate universe.
I am really inspired by stuff like Pino Donaggio, Fabio Frizzi, who I was able to use on my last film from Italy, from Rome, Italy. There worked with Fulci and all those early Italian horror films, and also
right. Oh, I'm very much a connoisseur of Italian horror films.
Oh, I love it. Oh yeah,
and the soundtracks particularly. James Collard and I are also very influenced by Goblin, who did the soundtrack for Suspiria. So that's another direction that certainly cast a shadow on our work.
I love that. You know what? It's weird you say it, because I could kind of pick up some of that is just in a little bit of maybe the composition. A little maybe Emerson from the Argento days too, like some of that Inferno stuff.
Nothing conscious, but it's just something in our musical DNA for sure.
Now, how can people before we go, and we're getting pretty close, how can people get a copy of the books, and how can people when's the music going to be coming out?
Sort of as the presidents of the United States have always said when they're about to go to war, all options are on the table for the Kingdom of Heaven album, which will be released soon, and that will be announced in all of my various media platforms, YouTube channel, Facebook, and my website. The MANSON FILE, Myth and Reality of an Outlaw Shaman, you can buy immediately. Operators are waiting now at www.nikolasschreck.eu, and you can order that anytime worldwide.
Wow, very cool, very cool. So nikolasschreck.eu, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to grab that.
www.nikolasschreck.eu, right.
That's awesome. And I want to tell you on a personal level, man, thank you and thank Zena both for sharing this with us. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that we were given a great gift here tonight, because number one, you don't normally do interviews, and number two, you're allowing us to play these songs for the first time anywhere. No one has heard them anywhere.
You were bred merely to hear them, so it's all part of a grand experiment.
That's awesome. And you guys have always been so good to us, and you are part of the family here.
Well, I want you to know we appreciate your support, too, and it's true. I grant very few interviews, but I appreciate, the support you've given us. So
of course, and we will continue to do so.
Mutual Appreciation Society.
Well, thank you so much. Now, before we go, we're going to be listening to one more track on our way out here, Midnight in Cairo. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, well, basically, most of our songs are not really self-expression. Usually we're telling a narrative or a story, or, as I said, a kind of condensed film. But this one is rather autobiographical. About 30 years ago, this November, actually, in Egypt, I had a mystical experience that was one of the landmark turning points in my life. And this song is sort of, through an artistic prism, some of what I experienced. And it's entitled Midnight in Cairo.
Exciting. Well, we're going to play a little bit of that right now, and then we'll say good night, but stick with us till the song's over here.
Okay.
Here we go.
I'll sneak out the back door.
Twilight calls, the muezzin, Pharaoh's mask, a fever dream. Nothing here is what it seems. Sunset on the Nile gleams.
I'm loving that.
That's awesome, yeah.
Yeah, it's got that grand feeling with the choir thing going there.
It's almost
and-
got that whole Gates of Babylon.
yeah,
sound
I'm
to it.
loving that Egyptian motif going on, man. That was good stuff right there. Nicholas, good job.
Thank you. And actually, you mentioned the Gates of Babylon. Actually, the Gates of Babylon are here in Berlin in a museum, and I visit it very often. But
Wow, that's cool. I bet you can feel some energy coming off of that.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
thank you for your time, and thank you for having me as a guest.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Okay.
You have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Okay, and best of luck to you in all of your endeavors.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Guys, Nikolas Schreck. Wow, what an honor that was. Man, see, that's the cool thing, you know, when you get to explore different avenues, different roads of life. And it's kind of cool because you never know. That's the great thing about Nightwatch. You just don't know what you're going to get on this show.